Welcome to the Big Fellas Podcast, where we chop it up about all things past, present, and future about the game of basketball. Where facts, stats, and context reign supreme.
That is blasphemous!
Sometimes it gets crazy, but we always keep it real. Get ready to learn from players, coaches, and fans from all levels of the game and see the court in a brand new way. And now, fresh off the sidelines, here's your host, John Hartophilus.
What it do, fellas, and welcome to the Big Fellas Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, JH, coming to you from New York City, the mecca of basketball. Today, I'm excited to be joined by George Galanopoulos, head coach of the Dallas Mavericks affiliate, Texas Legends. In this episode, we spoke about his journey through the coaching ranks of the Texas Legends, his experiences coaching in Africa with the Uganda men's national team, and the future of the NBA G League for rising NBA superstars right out of high school. We've got a going in store for you today, fellas. Episode number 32, George Galanopoulos, Texas Legends head coach. Yes, Yorgo Posise.
What you don't know about me is that I don't know Greek very well.
Oh, okay. I thought that'd be definitely a fun way to start it.
I know. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I know Yasu, Tikanatek, Alasi, and a couple swear words, and that's it.
You do have the swear words down, so that's the most important thing.
For sure.
As long as you're able to navigate it that way. I mean, if you just got dropped in Greece and you just knew how to say malaka, you'd be fine.
Yeah, well, that's what my mom called me whenever I was, being an ass growing up. So that's how I got to know that word.
Awesome. Coach George, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to this one because you have so many cool insights and you've seen so much in such a short time. You're still a relatively young coach. So I'm really thankful you can come on the show. And just to start for our listeners, can you kind of give us a quick little walkthrough of how you got introduced to the game as a kid?
Yeah, so I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. Dad bought me a basketball hoop that he put on the driveway. Fell in love with it from that point on. Started playing in organized leagues when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And played for my high school for a couple of years, and I started coaching in high school as well when I was about 17 years old, 5th and 6th grade at AAU, coached 7th and 8th grade my senior year, and I fell in love with it. And it was around that time that Lawrence Frank, a lot of former video coordinators that didn't have a strong playing background in the NBA or college came onto the scene, working their way up through internships and were coaching in the NBA. So that kind of paved the way for me. To realize that it was possible to do this as somebody that didn't play high level college or NBA or overseas or something like that. So that's kind of where it started, was just on the driveway, and it never stopped after that. And starting early in high school, I think, allowed me to find my love for coaching within the game as well.
That's awesome. And the most important thing you touched on right there is that it never stopped, which is the most beautiful thing about this whole thing. It's a game we start playing as kids, but it takes us into our careers as adults, which is just awesome. And you touched on a little bit too, how you saw how all these other people in video coordinators were finding success. And like, obviously we're going to touch on that too, because your path to kind of go up that ladder so quickly was awesome. But what I really thought was really cool was when you brought up how you were coaching when you were still in high school. So that's something I do now. I'm the freshman coach at Xavier, also coach for Super League and a bunch of other organizations. But my main thing is coaching the freshman team at Xavier. And I did that when I was 18, just freshman year of college. The players were about 14, 15 and very close in age. So, I mean, obviously that must have been the same thing for you at that point. And even now in the professional ranks, you might be coaching some guys that are older than you. What's that like? If you could speak on that.
Yeah, it's, for me personally, it's not something I think about. I don't think, this guy's older than I, so I got to treat him differently, or this guy's younger than I, so I feel like I could be more authoritative. I just think that it's important to be authentic when you're coaching. It's important to be yourself. It's important to, coach everybody fairly, even though you coach people differently based on their personalities. I think it just comes down to getting to know the person, getting to know who you're talking to, who you're working with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's players or staff, regardless of age, and just build that relationship. And you build it through getting to know them. You build it through, that builds through trust. And I think it just kind of is a domino effect from there. So I don't really look at it by, I'm older, I'm younger, this, that. I do my best to prepare every day to be my best self so that I can best help others, whether staff, players, whatever it is. And that's kind of at the foundation of my personal philosophy on how I coach individuals.
That's great. It's definitely the way to do it. What I took from that was authenticity always wins. And when you approach it with that kind of mindset and that perspective of, as long as I'm my best self, whether someone's way older than me or way younger than me, they'll look at me and say, okay, wow, George knows his stuff.
just to kind of expand on that a little bit, something I thought about was, if there are guys that are older than I am, for example, that means that they simply have more experience, or even guys that are younger, they have different experiences. So what I've learned, especially in this last year more than ever, is how much you can learn from players, how much you can learn from other people, whether they have more years of experience or just different experiences throughout those years. I think it's important to take that humble approach, detach yourself from your own ego, and just learn and realize that you can learn something different from every single person. So that's something else I think that I learned to value a lot after this first season.
Of course, everyone has a different experience, and no matter who they are, or how maybe how good they are, or how old they are, or young they are, everyone can teach you something. That's awesome. And off that kind of topic of teaching someone something, I mean, you obviously touched on kind of your father and that role he played in basketball, but who were kind of some of your mentors in life, especially maybe starting on or even now?
Yeah. So besides my father, both my parents, somebody I met at a young age in high school and who actually helped me with my first coaching gig in high school was a guy by the name of Steve Pratt. He was and still is the CEO of Full Package Athletics, which is run out of the Chicago suburbs. It's a basketball training academy. They got AAU teams, individual development, all of that stuff. So he's been doing that, I think, for the last 20 years now. And he's been a mentor to me from day one. He's somebody that gave me, or he got me my first internship in the G League when it was the D League back in 2011, because his very good friend was the coach of the team. So, I worked for Steve in high school, and then he helped me get that opportunity with his friend as a basketball operations intern. So he's somebody that not only has helped me with opportunities, but we continue to talk once or twice a week sometimes. And he's somebody that, as I talk to him, I continue to learn from him. I mean, he's not just somebody that tells me you're doing great, I'm proud of you. He listens to what I say, and he'll call me out on certain things. He's always evaluating. He's always trying to help me. He's always, keeping my perspective fresh, and, helping me empathize with others and helping me see a different perspective. So I think those types of mentors are really important to have around you. Nelson's been a guy like that for me. When I went to Bakersfield that first year as an intern, I think he was the video coordinator at the time, and he just has like a vast amount of experience. And from the time I was young to even now as an assistant coach, he's somebody that I can trust to coach me, mentor me, and tell me the truth. And I think it's important to have those types of people around you. So, those two. Will Voigt, who I worked for in Bakersfield, is another coach that at a young age, when I was impressionable and still pretty malleable, um, I think he's somebody that was honest with me about who I was as a person and what I needed to do and how I needed to work on myself to get to where I am today. And not just from a position standpoint, how you get to be a head coach at 31, but from a personality standpoint, how you get to a point where you are really looking to help and serve others over anything else that's maybe selfishly driven.
Thing took away from that is number one, how important it is to have good mentors, and also, but maybe not even mentors, but even peers that can also mentor you, but also kind of point you in that direction. Like someone like Nelson who could tell you you have spinach in your teeth or something to that effect, and help you get through that. So it's so important to have people like that. And you also kind of touched on it, the mentor that helped you kind of get into then the D League right away, right after college. What did that kind of look like for you in terms of right after graduating, you kind of were able to land right into basketball, which is I would imagine it's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, at that time, up to that point in my life at a young age, I had not had trouble getting jobs, right? I'd worked for a few people. It seemed like everything just kind of worked out serendipitously, and this person knew this person, and it was always on a phone call that I got something. And I think at a young age, you take it for granted a little bit. And what I didn't know going into it was how difficult those opportunities are to get. Um, and at the professional level, especially as an intern in the D League, when there's a lot less manpower in the staff, how much work there actually is. And I can openly say I struggled with it a little bit. I was young, I was out of college, I was a little bit arrogant, thought I knew a lot more than I did, obviously. And it was a wake up call, and having people like Nelson around, having somebody like Will Voigt who really held me accountable to the highest standard, helped me kind of take a step back and see everything through a much different lens, a much clearer lens with a broader perspective of, this isn't about me. This isn't about my coaching journey. This is about how can I help others? And I think the best way to help others is figure out how you can become the best version of yourself. You constantly need to be working on yourself, and that was a big year for me. It was a big transition year, and having a lot of those honest conversations with people, those mentors about how I could be better, was something that happened constantly throughout that season. And that off season, I went back to Chicago, worked for Steve Pratt again, who knew by talking to Will that I had some work that I had to do, some personal work, and came back the next season. I think just with a much better and fresher perspective of how to do my best in my role, to help the team, to help the coach, to just help the players get better, and help the people around me, and just to trust that the rest kind of takes care of itself. But yeah, that first year was it was a little overwhelming with the amount of work, and just something that I had to get used to. I think you really grow when you're in an uncomfortable space, and not just uncomfortable in the sense that this is not something I do often, but it's pretty uncomfortable when you got a number of people constantly telling you, like, you're not perfect. You got a lot of work that you got to do, and it's hard, but you got to self-reflect. You got to figure out, why you think the way you think and do things the way you do things, and figure out just how to be better from that. So that was a huge transition year, and very, very integral to how I became the person that I am.
Of course, and it's important for people to realize that you're going to hit those speed bumps. It's going to get a little rocky, especially at the beginning. But I mean, if you stay the course and you obviously had the willingness to go and ask other people for help, and that's super important, because let's say you kept that and bottled it up inside of you and counterproductive and self-destructive. So you're able to go ask for help and grow in that way. So which is great. Also, you went from the Mavericks to the G League, back to the Mavericks, back to the G League, and that's kind of a lot of what goes on in the G League in terms of there's always that transition, that influx, and things are always changing. The change is probably the only constant in the G League. If you can kind of touch on that whole period for you.
Yeah. So without going too far back and spending too much time on it, after that intern year, I spent 2 more years in Bakersfield, the second as a player development coach, and the third as an assistant coach. So I got a really good experience, really good hands-on experience, coaching on the floor, delivering scouts, video work, working with the players on the court. You just wear so many different hats when you're in the G League and even the D League at the time, where staffs were a lot smaller. So I got very good hands-on coaching experience there. The following season, I didn't get an opportunity. The Phoenix Suns bought the Bakersfield Jam, and they got a whole new staff. So I actually moved out to New Zealand for 5 months and coached as an assistant over there, just to kind of keep my foot in the door, keep learning different type of life experience going overseas. And then wanted to get back in the NBA. And the only job I got, thankfully, was a player development internship with the Dallas Mavericks. That was the first time that they were doing a program where they hired 12 interns just to be on the court. And at that point, I'd been a coach. I'd been an assistant coach. I worked 3 years in the G League. I was an assistant coach for the team in New Zealand. So I felt like I could bring more value than just working with on the court. But I wanted to coach in the NBA, and that was the one opportunity I got. So based on what happened in Bakersfield, having had really work on myself from a maturity standpoint, I think prepped me well for that role with the Mavericks. That no matter how valuable you think you are, no matter how much more responsibility you think you could take on, you just need to be really good in your role and just do whatever you can to help in that role. So that was my kind of approach in that season. Thankfully, there was a spot open as an assistant coach with the Legends the following season. So they hired me there and kept me on. And then again, serendipitously, a role opened up in the video room for an assistant video coordinator position. And thankfully, they had me in mind and hired me full time just before that next season started. So I spent the next 2 years in the video room with the Mavericks, and then again, serendipitously, a head coaching position opens, and the stars aligned, and they decided that they wanted to hire me in that role, which I'm obviously extremely grateful for. And certain things you don't have control over, as far as how positions open up or where people move to and move out. All you could do is just be really good at your role, continue to learn, build relationships, and they just kind of things just kind of worked out that way.
Of course, and it's great to kind of realize how things do kind of sometimes just work out that way. But you had to do so much before that. Obviously, you did so many cool things with the Mavericks at the beginning. This year was cut short due to the coronavirus. I saw that it actually happened on your birthday. I don't know if you have a good story to talk about with that. But you guys were in the playoff hunt, a successful first season. What were your kind of thoughts on just the season as a whole before we start touching in on like some of the specifics that you've kind of seen over the course of the 4 years there?
Yeah, there's so much to say about it. If I could sum it up, it was an incredible learning experience in so many different facets, both individually for me as a coach. When you're thrown into the fire like that, and there's so many things that you have to oversee and worry about, you notice how difficult it is and how many blind spots you have as a coach. And I noticed a lot of different blind spots I had. Thankfully, I had a lot of good people around me to help me through all of that. And that's, I think, the one thing that comes to mind too is we had a lot of great people that were a part of our organization, players, staff, management, even the people on the business side. Just a lot of good people all pulling in the right direction. And it's very difficult in the G League to find a good group of guys that are very cohesive just because there's so much roster change and movement. But our core group of guys that were there all year long, just simply a great group of guys. And thankfully they got to know each other. They hung out off the court. They would go to team meals on their own that they would plan as a team, just the players. So as a coach, there's not much more that you can ask for, that you just had a good group of guys that pulled for each other and that supported each other, treated the staff well, the staff treated the players with respect. There was just a good environment, I think, every single day that was conducive to the players getting better. And that's ultimately what the players want. They want to get better. And that's the environment we tried to build. And you don't build that unless you have good people. So we had really, really good people. I was hoping to see the season finish out, obviously, just because we were starting to play some pretty good basketball the last few games. And you want to see it for the players. It's every game is an opportunity for those guys to showcase what they can do and potentially get called up. A lot can happen at the NBA level in 24 hours, let alone 24 days. So it was unfortunate for those guys specifically that it was cut short because they just simply had more opportunity to play. But it was what it was. Everybody was affected by it. But to look back on it, it wasn't a disappointment that it was cut short. That just is what it is. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have just spent with all those people in the building every day.
Of course. And what I find so interesting about that is that you spoke so much about the process you guys take to win games, and it had nothing to do with basketball. And it's funny because so many people come on the show and talk about how there's so much more to it than the game itself. And it's the things like players planning their own team dinners and actually liking each other and having fun off the court. I mean, I know you could probably speak to it in terms of how much you've seen that stuff actually, while people might not think of it as like what leads to winning, it's what leads to winning more than any X's and O's or any technical stuff ever could.
Yeah, I think, and look, the basketball stuff's important. I've always heard it's not about the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmies and the Joes, right? Meaning like it's about the person, it's about the people. I've heard that from the time I was a youngster from coaches, and I get that. It is about the people for sure. The basketball stuff is important. Every day I had to, along with the other assistants, prepare to be able to give our players the right information, the valuable information that was going to help them succeed on the court. And that's a very important aspect of it, especially at the professional level. You need to be prepared every day. These players are very smart, and any day that you're quote unquote off as a coach or you didn't come in prepared, they'll see it. And that matters to them. It matters to everybody as far as what you want the outcome to be at the end of the day. What I think is important is, if you want to win, I don't think the conversation is constantly about winning. I don't think it's constantly, we got to win tomorrow. We got to do this. And we said that in our first meeting. We all want to win. And we're not going into this not trying to win a game. Anytime we're in a drill and practice, we're keeping score, we step between the lines, any game we have, we're trying to win the game. And that's how you need to approach it. But the way in which I think you manifest those wins is by your daily habits, your daily behaviors. Are your habits and are your behaviors aligning with what you want that outcome to be, which is ultimately to win, to get call-ups, to get better, to get that big contract? You can't just walk in every day sulking that we didn't win yesterday, or sulking we've lost 5 in a row, or sulking because you haven't gotten that call-up. You just need to walk into the gym and simply figure out what I need to do today to be better tomorrow. And you just take that approach every single day and just kind of chip away at it. And sooner or later, the byproduct is a win, is 5 wins in a row, is a 24-19 season. And I think I could have been better, even better at that, at helping our staff and our players see that from day one. But I think it got better as the year went on. And I think having some of the players that we had and the personalities and the character that we had in that building, that locker room, really, really aided in that for sure.
Of course, and that's such a great way to put it in terms of putting it all into perspective, because some people get caught up in focusing on like what you said, X's and O's or Jimmy's or Joe's. But if you really put them all together, you really get a much better product, and it does lead to winning games instead of just always thinking about that win in the back of your head. I did read this Sports Illustrated article about you coaching internationally with Uganda, being the head coach there. What was that kind of like? Because you were still in the G League, you ended up spending your summers over there in Africa. I mean, everyone always talks about how European basketball, they always kind of relate that to overseas. Whenever you hear someone, I'm playing overseas, they're playing in Europe. And no one really talks about African basketball that much. What was that look like for you in terms of making the transition over there?
Yeah, so the transition over there happened in stages for me. It was a little overwhelming at first, to a degree where I went to a country that I'd never been to before. I think our first tournament was in Alexandria, Egypt, and had to prep for 2 weeks in a training camp and play 3 straight games in a row. So it was different. It was a great learning experience. Made me realize how hard being a head coach actually is. Didn't discourage me from wanting to be it. Just made me realize how difficult it is and how much you got to work at it. But as I've been involved for the last 3-4 years, I've gotten more involved in youth basketball in Africa. I had the opportunity to help coach Giants of Africa, which is a youth basketball camp across 7 or 8 different countries that Masai Ujiri runs, with other coaches and scouts from around the world that have African roots. And what I realized was, how much untapped potential there is in Africa, because basketball is a game that is not as easily accessible as a game like soccer, for example. Soccer is the most popular sport in the world, and is the most popular sport in Africa. And the reality is basketball could be their best sport, and some of them don't even know it because they haven't played. So you're getting these kids to camps that are 14, 15, 16 years old that have never dribbled before, but they're 6'7" or 6'8". So it's really interesting to see the NBA now is starting to take a vested interest in what's going on over there. They're starting to build these academies. Rwanda has built this multi-million-dollar arena that seats close to 15,000 people. Uganda is trying to do the same, and you're seeing that more and more around the continent. And I think as time goes on, what you'll see, besides just national teams potentially getting better, is just simply the continent itself and the players improving at the grassroots level. You see those success stories like a Pascal Siakam, a Joel Embiid, a Serge Ibaka. I think you're going to start seeing more of those because the NBA is taking it more seriously and investing more money in it, investing coaching in it. They're investing in the coaches on the continent so that they can be better to help these kids at a young age. There's just so many people on the continent, and a lot of them are starting to learn and fall in love with the game of basketball. So from that perspective, it's a developing sport in the country, and these kids are starting to learn. They're starting to learn how to work. They're starting to learn what it means to go work out, what it looks like to work out, what it looks like to play the right brand of basketball, spacing, the whole 9 yards. A lot of it is starting from the ground up. So it's been really, really interesting to see. What I thought was just going to be originally something on the resume, coaching a national team, has turned into like a passionate interest in helping the country, and I'm not the only one. There's a ton, obviously. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how all of it pans out and develops.
Oh, that's super interesting because no one really thinks about that. And when you think about the untapped potential in Africa, it's kind of, you can kind of maybe, I'm not sure if you can compare it to Europe in the 90s, and then the Barcelona happens in 1992, and basketball explodes there. It's kind of the same way how all of these African players are coming over, like the Serge Ibaka, like the Pascal Siakam, as you had mentioned, or Joel Embiid, and they're spreading the game. They're playing here, and kids back in Africa are saying, "Wow, I could do that too." Imagine all these other countries or all these other full continents that are completely untapped and have all this potential, where if you just start getting kids to play basketball at a younger age or increase the level of coaching there, I mean, it's just going to explode in terms of the popularity and the kind of talent you're getting out of there.
Yeah, and think about it from this perspective, like Luka Doncic, right? Doncic had been playing, 2-3 grades up from the time he was 8 or 9 years old, and signs his first professional contract, I think, at 14 or 15 years old. He's playing for one of the best teams in the world, And it's one of the best teams in the world because it's very structured, right? The teaching is solid. They value the fundamentals. And he was playing at the highest level from the time he was 14 or 15 years old. A lot of these kids that are making it out of Africa, like a Joel Embiid, you hear Akeem Olajuwon even back in the day. I don't think he even picked up a basketball until he was like 16 or 17. So if you could imagine these guys playing, from 4 or 5 years old, getting the opportunity to develop a lot at a young age, and then they're thrown into a very competitive, potentially professional environment and atmosphere at 13 or 14 years old. Sky's the limit, for those kids. So a lot of it is circumstance for these kids, especially in Africa. And I think that's what the NBA and everybody's trying to do is help those circumstances and help those kids find that potential and reach it at a much younger age.
It's so cool to think about too, how you mentioned how, imagine if we start playing at 4 or 5. We don't have to really imagine that anymore because those 4 and 5 year olds exist right now. They're there. They were born in 2015, 2014, whatever it might be, and they're alive. They're in Africa, and in 10 years they'll be 16 and about to storm onto the professional scene. So it's insane to really think about that and wrap your mind around that. And also what you're saying about how guys like Luka Doncic are playing up 3 years or up 4 years and playing professionally at 14. Guys mostly here in the States in high school are reclassing to kind of just play below their age group instead of going up 3 levels, which is definitely a huge different cultural and just kind of the way they do things over there.
Yeah.
Off that point, I mean, obviously the G League has had a complete rebranding in recent years from the D League, and they're becoming a lot more high school players are going straight to the G League. And even that was even a newer thing in the past few months, as opposed to going to the NCAA. What do you see happening with that in coming years? Because that changes the whole youth system in terms of how players go on to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to take maybe a full year, considering the circumstances from COVID and the way that this season is going to play out. I don't even know at this point. We're just hearing dates thrown at us, randomly about when potentially the NBA wants to start, when the G League is going to start, if the G League is going to start at all. So I think it's going to take a full season for them to really figure out how they can maximize the development of those players in a normal climate. I think the NBA is very creative. They understand how much is invested in these kids and their development. And I think, considering the circumstances, it remains to be seen over the next 4, 5, 6 months how they plan to do that. I think they'll do the best with what they have. But to actually look at it and say, how are they actually going to maximize that talent? How are they going to maximize the experience and the potential of these kids? And how is that going to change the landscape of youth basketball and decision making for high schoolers? I think it's going to take a little bit over a year to see exactly how it does impact it. But the idea to play in a professional setting here in America, with really great resources, and you got the NBA and investing a lot in that. I think it could only be good. Brian Shaw is a very reputable coach who's coached at the highest level. He's played at the highest level, understands what it takes to be successful and have understand longevity in this business and in this league. So I think it could only mean good things in the future for these kids, and they'll set the example, for the others to follow.
Definitely, there's definitely a new wave coming in, and so like you're saying, just a year or two, the whole landscape might be different. And then 2 years after that, the whole landscape might be different. And then 5 years after that, we'll get an influx of guys from Africa that are going to come in and dominate the basketball scene. So it's crazy to think as to how many levels there are to this and how much it always changes. So just to wrap up, I'm just curious. I ask every guest this to kind of see how much you've kind of grown since your early stages. What's some advice you'd give to a 20-year-old George Galanopoulos, just kind of maybe graduating from Indiana or just kind of getting into the basketball scene? What would you tell him to kind of help him on his path?
Oh, wow. A lot. I would, but since we don't have much time left, I would, whether they want to be a coach or whether they want to be a GM, just assuming they want to work in basketball, what I would tell them is do your best in your specific role to help the people around you. Learn as much as you possibly can. Add value to yourself. The only way you're going to get hired for the next job is if they find value in you and think that you can help them in a specific capacity to help the organization. So you do need to add value. You do need to learn. But in the role you're in, star in that role. Be as good as you possibly can, and the rest will take care of itself. I know that sounds, it might sound a little bit hokey and Cinderella-ish, but it's what I've seen work, for me personally, and I know everybody's on a different path, but you just need to be really, really good at your role that you're in specifically, and never be too big for a task. Just always look to be as helpful as you possibly can to other people. You'll build more meaningful relationships that way. And I think you'll be happier that way if you're helping to serve others more than you're just worrying about your own specific path every single day.
Love that. The great advice. One question, quick thing I want to see if what you think about it is, Xavier, a lot of the times we say that it's not really about what your role is to get that rebound. It's your purpose to get that rebound. I'm kind of curious to see what you kind of think about that. Kind of just change up with the word of what do you think about that? I don't know if you like that at all. What do you think?
I do like it. I don't know if this is right or if we're on the same wavelength here, but it makes me think about, like, when I was an intern, say for the Mavericks, right? I was a player development intern. A lot of what I was doing, I wasn't coaching. I was on the court being told to rebound, play defense, whatever it is. And if my role was just to rebound, my idea is, how well can you rebound, right? Like, how hard can you sprint after the ball? How quickly can you get the ball? How quickly and efficiently can you get the ball back to the coach so that, the workout is not interrupted and you keep the flow to it? Like, that to me is what it means to star in your role. That's what it means to find purpose. The purpose in me being in that role was it was partly to be like the best rebounder, but how can I help this workout? How can I help this coach help this player? And for me, the most simplest way was to sprint after the ball, to make sure it only bounced once. In my head, I had a one bounce rule. The ball could only bounce once, no matter if it was a long rebound or not. And I was going to bounce it right back to the coach as quickly as possible so that the player can get more shots. And that was my purpose in it, was how can I help? How can I help the coach help the player? And vice versa. So I agree with you. I've always said it's about your purpose. You talk about burnout. You talk about people that just don't want to do it anymore. I think some people allow stress and burnout to get to them because they forget what their purpose is. Every single day I realize I can't get too caught up and overwhelmed in things, because my purpose at the end of the day is to help people get better. And you can't allow the stress of a loss or a win, to compromise that purpose that you have. I don't know if that answered your question, but it's what I thought of in response to kind of what you were saying.
Oh, that was perfect. It definitely does, because that getting that rebound isn't just, it obviously helps the job, but in the bigger picture, it helps just the team get better, which is obviously the goal. So you might think of it as, like someone might belittle that and say, I'm just getting rebounds, as if it's a small thing, but it's part of your purpose to make the team win more games, to get the team better. And that's definitely something that when you really think of it in that big picture, it makes even all those little things, it makes you realize why people talk about how those little things are make a big difference. It's because they're all part of the purpose.
Yeah,
they're all part of that.
As simple as tasks like that are, it's very easy to lose interest in them.
Yep.
Because you think, what is my purpose here? Why am I here? They don't need me. I'm not that valuable. Well, figure out how to make yourself valuable, and figure out how, you can make your purpose worth it there. So that's pretty much it.
No, Coach George, thank you so much for coming on. This was fantastic. I know, it's like your perspectives on where you kind of have seen the game are just so unique, and it's something that I think our listeners and obviously myself are going to learn a lot about, and are going to take a lot of gems from this conversation. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, John. Best of luck to you as well.
Thanks for listening to the Big Fellas Podcast. Check us out on all major social media platforms at Big Fellas Pod to join the chop up. You can also listen to us on every podcast platform on the planet. Stay tuned for the next episode, Big Fellas.